Good evening. This is Ron Felton with OREA Realty, and I took a few minutes earlier today to create this flow chart. It kind of shows the layout and the correlation between the DRE and the NAR and a licensee and a realtor. And so without wasting any more time, we're just going to dive right into this and go over a few things. So like most people, when we go to investigate a career in the real estate industry, we start out in whatever state we're in through a licensing board. In this state, this California Department of Real Estate is the governing body for law and licensing in the state of California. And so the most common to us, obviously, are the real estate salesperson's license, and of course, the real estate broker's license. Now, in order to achieve those, you have to take a certain amount of hours, days in college credits to receive a license. And so in case with the real estate salesperson's license, that's 54 days or something like that. And then after a couple years, you can take more credited courses and you can become a real estate broker. Now, there's another way to become a real estate broker. Obviously, you can go to college for 4 years and get a minor major in real estate, and then after that, you can actually become a real estate broker without going to get your real estate license, salesperson's license first. So, one thing we should clear up right here is neither one of these make you a realtor, and neither one of these make you a licensed agent. Okay, you're a real estate salesperson license or a real estate broker's license. Now, in order for you to practice real estate in the state of California as a real estate salesperson, you actually have to hang your hat or hold your license underneath a real estate broker. And so when you do that, you become part of an agency and you become an agent, but there is no certification for that. You're just acting as an agent underneath an agency, and that's what makes you a real estate agent or a licensed agent, if you want to call somebody a licensed agent. But technically the state only has these two designations, and you can obviously see realtor is not one of them. So now, moving on. The National Association of Realtors is, I apologize, is different. They control ethical standards, fair housing policies that they help write and educate licensed real estate agents and realtors on those policies, and become more of an advocate for the industry. They're not they're more focused on ethics, and obviously they have no control over law and licensing. But what they do have control over is this thing called the Internet Data Exchange. And what most people don't realize is that the National Association of Realtors actually owns the Internet Data Exchange. This is where all the information that we could ever possibly want at our disposal for the housing industry is all contained in this place, and I'm pretty sure it goes all the way back to like the 50s. And so they own this, and so this is very important to us, because how do we know how much houses have historically cost? What are our trends? What are our markets? What are they worth now? Where do we put all this information? And so as a result, pardon me. So as a result, we would be lost without this. And it's actually kind of funny to hear people try to separate the system from NAR and their involvement sometimes, because they actually, if they took their ball and went home, then you wouldn't be able to play ball anymore. It's kind of funny because they own all the information. And why is that important? because they have a gateway between the Internet Data Exchange and the access that we as licensed brokerage firms have access to that information through these services called multiple listing services. And they're third-party vendors, normally owned by a totally separate company that have an agreement with the National Association of Realtors on how they will compile that data and bring it into the system and how they will take it out. And that's very important to know that, because in order for that data to stay accurate, they need somebody that's got skin in the game, that has every interest in providing the most accurate information that they can back into that system, and also utilizing that information accurately when they pull it out of the system. But obviously the National Association of Realtors can't take the time to school or educate or police basically in the state of California 180,000 or so agents, or however many that is. So what do? They leave it up to the brokerage firms to do that, and the brokerage firms write agreements as well. We'll get into that in a second. But first off, the multiple listing service has an agreement with the National Association of Realtors, but it's actually with the IDX exchange, and how they will bring information in and take it out, and they're bound by that agreement if you want to be a third-party vendor. And where those multiple listing services end up, they end up in today's world, interesting enough, which they didn't happen years and years ago when we didn't have the internet the way that we have the internet now, is they end up in the general public's hands in some ways. And those rules have been written over and over again over the years, because data is getting filtered and brought out. But basically, the public websites that you see are only allowed a certain amount of information and data that they can pull through the multiple listing service, or like brokers can pull through their website through the multiple listing service with an IDX account. And you have to be approved for those accounts, again, because it has to be used professionally. Now, the information that gets filtered that goes out to the general public obviously is less information than what you would have at your hands, and maybe not as accurate or as quick as you would have in your hands as somebody who has access directly to the IDX, or a gateway directly to the IDX. Now, how do we get access to the IDX? Now, because they want to control the information that goes in and out of the Internet Data Exchange, and they want to do that by having the brokers be responsible for that information, because they don't want to sit and police 180,000 agents per state in this state, but others obviously different. Because keeping in mind, the National Association of Realtors is above as far as coverage of your state level, not as authority, but as far as coverage. You know, this is why we need them, because they're looking at things across the nation, as where your state is just looking basically at fair housing, federal stuff, but they're paying attention to your state, not the whole nation in general. And they certainly aren't paying attention to what's going on with like demographics and sales. It's just law and licensing. And so, moving on. In order for you to access the best level of information from the multiple listing service, or from a third-party vendor, in our cases we call it MetroList, what happens, you have to join an association as a broker, so that way you're affiliated in a way with that exchange. And that is NAR's way of guaranteeing that you are going to be part of their association before you access their information. Now, that doesn't give you access to that information, because you can become a broker and then join the association and still not pay to be part of the multiple listing service. So that doesn't completely, you have to actually become a subscriber and do an agreement. But carrying on with that, in order for anyone to get involved, they have to be under a licensed broker, and they have to join a bottom level association that's connected to the Metro List, or the MLS, I'm sorry, multiple listing service in your area. Now, the way that the National Association of Realtors works is it's a 3-tiered association. It has a national level, it has a state level, and it has a local level, and that's everywhere across the entire nation. And the reason for that is because we cannot disseminate information well if we don't go to the local level, and we can't compile it well if we don't do it nationally. So that's simple math right there. And so what happens when you join your local realtor association, and notice that I said it's realtor, and it only has one A and 2 syllables, and I know how to spell it correctly, and I know how to say it correctly. So you can't join first if you can't say it or spell it. That's a joke, but seriously. By default, when you join your local realtor association, you also join the California Association of Realtors in this state, and you also join the National Association of Realtors in this state. But you do not join the multiple listing service, because that's a third-party vendor, and you don't buy into that just by becoming a realtor. Now, if you notice that when you joined this association, you became a realtor. Not only are you a licensed salesperson or broker or both. No, you can't actually be both, because once you become a broker, you're just a broker. But nonetheless, once you become either one of those in this state, you still don't become a realtor. And just because you become a realtor doesn't change any one of those other certifications or licensees. What makes you a realtor is your association with the National Association of Realtors. Just like if you were to join NASCAR or any other kind of association, you can still go get a driver's license, and you still have to drive correctly, and the law is still going to be out there, because they're not the ones who issue license. They're the ones who are an association that take care of drivers, race car drivers. But in this case, we're just a real estate association, much bigger than the race car association, which is by far the largest attending sports in the nation, but real estate's still bigger. So this association is important because it controls, if you want to call it that, which it's a tough word because that's what gets everyone in trouble, but it controls how we get information and what we see. And it's important because in this world, it'd be very hard to find houses quickly and efficiently without the internet and that exchange of information. I mean, it would just be a lot of lunches. And so once you join by default to a local realtor association, and you become tiered up basically by default into this association, you still would have to join a multiple listing service to be able to get that information. Now, the interesting thing is, a multiple listing service will not let you join unless you are a broker that is part of the National Association of Realtors. So you actually cannot just be a broker and join multiple listing services, because they want professionals in their association. So it's a tricky thing, but you're not just going to be a broker that's going to be given access indirectly to their information. So as a result of that, it makes it very clean and organized, or if you want to call it that, controlled. So there are other ways to get information out of the internet data exchange, but we're not going to get into the intricacies of that. In the short of it, you join the association, you're tiered up nationally, you're tiered down to your local multiple listing service, but then you have to join that service and you have to pay to be part of that service. And by doing so, you become a subscriber, and you become basically you're in contract with them to do things correctly, and they will. When you list homes, you bet if you don't identify them correctly and put the wrong kind of information in there, you will be called out on it, if not by one of your peers, by the Metro List themselves, because they don't want to lose their licensing or be impacted by your ill behavior. Moving on. Now, Brokers are allowed unfiltered data for MLS subscribers. Are realtors allowed that? Yes. Are licensed brokers allowed that? You see? Yes, only because you have to be a licensed broker to be part of the National Association of Realtors or underneath one, and you actually have to be a broker to join the multiple listing service. So it's a catch. The state controls who's a broker. They're just using that as a criteria, which serves them well, obviously, and it serves all of us well if we understand the organization and what it does for us. Now, we also agree that we are going to pass information into that system as well accurately, and that's when we take on a listing and we pass it into the system, and as a result we're putting information back through the multiple listing service, which is again the gateway back and forth to the IDX exchange, and all that information gets stored, and they're compiling more and more every day. Even we probably sold a few thousand homes just now as we had this conversation. That's how great real estate is. Now, why does that work for you as the consumer outside of real estate? And if you're a consumer, this is geared towards somebody who's active in the industry one way or the other, but how does that help out somebody on the consumer end of it? Okay, let's discuss real quick what those benefits to the consumer might be, because the consumer is not going to really experience these benefits directly, because no matter what happens, they're going to be represented by somebody who's licensed in the state. That's bottom line if it's done legally. And so it's going to be hard for them to understand the benefits of being represented by somebody who's part of the National Association of Realtors or a realtor. And so, we could sit here and explain to ourselves what that benefit is, but that benefit, you become the gateway and the exchange at that point to all that information, and anyone can go and take those tests and become a licensee. Not anyone, but obviously people do. It's not that complicated to go get certifications for almost anything or become educated if you put yourself to it. But the thing is, what do you do with that license? And by joining an association, having access to that information, you're showing a greater responsibility for having that license and a greater level of professionalism. So the consumer gets to utilize you because they can't go join that exchange and get that information. They get to use you as a licensed realtor, not only to access that information, but to know that it's being done, hopefully by the rules, by what you signed up for, ethically, and with treatment fairly to all through that process. And boy, I tell you, if you could make people understand the benefits of acting with a realtor versus acting with the licensed salesperson or licensed brokerage, like you can't have one without the other, but understanding the benefits of that, when people take that seriously, as you should. If you are wearing that R, you should understand it. You should know how to spell it. You should know that it has 2 syllables and only 1 A, and it's all capitals. I mean, this is real. Like, this is where it's real estate. Anyways, that's all I got. Almost 20 minutes. Thanks for listening. Take care.